I'm Marin Alsop. I'm chief conductor of the Vienna Radio Symphony Orchestra and chief conductor and artistic director of the National Polish Radio Orchestra. And we're here today to speak about my favorite subject, Leonard Bernstein. I had the great pleasure of studying with Bernstein for several years, and he was always my hero.
Oh, those pitch drums are much too low. It should be so elegant and little high ones. And tambourine, just touch it, just as lightly as possible, all right?
You better go back. It's take 74.
I first saw Leonard Bernstein in person when I was 9 years old, and my dad took me to one of his concerts. And from that moment on, I was completely obsessed with the idea of becoming a conductor because I wanted to have the kind of joy and fun that this guy that I observed was having. And from that day on, I never changed my mind. I wanted to be a conductor. When I later told Bernstein that story, of course, he said, "Oh, that makes me feel old." So I felt guilty about it. But, I think he was happy when I told him that I had two posters on my wall, my two greatest musical influences, Leonard Bernstein and the Beatles. And he was keen to know that his poster was bigger. Conducting is quite unique in that there isn't a sort of formula for study or for teaching. And as with everything with Leonard Bernstein, it was very in the moment and of the moment. And so I would sort of hang around and hope that I could talk to him about some music because that was always incredibly inspiring and informative. But I have to say that I appreciated hearing him talk about anything. Politics, the world, the future, the past, literature. I mean, he was so incredibly knowledgeable and so well-read. And he had this intense capacity to connect the dots in life. From one subject over here to another over here, he could bring them together in a cohesive whole. So I loved hearing his views on the world. I so admired that he stood up for everything he believed in, whether I agreed with it or not. It was an incredible role model for me. And so I would say I learned, an immense amount, of course, about music from Leonard Bernstein, but I probably learned just as much about being a citizen of the world. Bernstein always said that our job as the conductor is to be the messenger for the composer. That's our primary responsibility. So when I conduct his music, it feels even more pressing that I try to stay true to the person I knew. His music is filled with I think, conflict, with contrast, with excitement, with rhythmic drive, with humor. He was a complex man and a simple man at the same time. And by simple, I mean he was honest and he was authentic. And I so appreciated that. So I try to approach his music in that same way. But something really important to know about Leonard Bernstein was he was a fantastic storyteller. And I can't imagine growing up in that household and not having an amazing tale told to me every night, at bedtime. And he always spoke about the narrative behind a piece of music, that's our responsibility, is to convey that story. And for Bernstein, it wasn't just, a beginning, middle, end. Every story has a moral as well. And this was essential, I think, to Bernstein. I think this short clip really captures everything I knew about Leonard Bernstein, his affection, his enthusiasm, his sheer joy.
You really want those spaces before the piano each time?
Each time, not this
And
time.
this one?
I think not.
Well,
Yes,
Why
I fixed
not?
now.
Why not all the time?
Oh, this is such a surprise. The beautiful, warm
See,
string
you
sound.
cut this off.
Yes,
Off. There's a hole.
yes. So we
And
try
this way,
sustain.
there's no hole. Mm-hmm. See if you can do it. Mm-hmm. It's a little hard.
I know, a little tricky, huh? Well, you stay here, okay?
I loved him for so many reasons, but maybe one of the biggest reasons was that I loved watching him break all the rules. And he did that his whole life. You know, he was best known for a composition that wasn't a classical music composition, West Side Story.
Everywhere crime in America, organized crime in America, terrible time in America.
You forget I'm in America.
And that musical really changed the trajectory of American musical theater. And it brought together different genres, different ideas, different characters, different styles of music. I mean, he was someone who really blurred all the boundaries. I think he was like Duke Ellington. You know, Duke Ellington said there are two kinds of music, good music and bad music. And I think Bernstein was definitely of the same mind. I think West Side Story, Bernstein's West Side Story, really embodies all of his different dimensions. The narrative of the story, of course, is Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. So we have this iconic piece of literature that's the foundation. But Bernstein and his colleagues turned it into sort of a modern day version. And, you know, it's very, very sophisticated piece while also very straightforward and simple. It gives you some idea into his thought process. The opening interval is what's called a tritone, and it's the most conflict-ridden interval in music. It requires being resolved. It was even called in the old days the devil's interval. So he uses this tritone to open this piece. So the signal is, this is a piece about conflict and a need for resolution. So you see, in the opening two notes, we already have like 17 conflicts going on, or 17 different aspects to Leonard Bernstein. I think for anyone who's just interested in hearing some of Bernstein, of course, West Side Story is wonderful, and you know, I think Somewhere, this song is one of the most beautiful songs ever written. Bernstein had that gift for tune and melody. But for me, I would say the piece I would suggest is, it might surprise you, it's a piece called Mass. And it's a piece that he wrote for the opening of the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. And it was commissioned by Jackie Kennedy in memory of JFK. And so Bernstein, he wants to write something that is really out of the box because JFK was unique. And he tries to think of the distinguishing, unique features about Kennedy. And the first thing that comes to him, I think, is that he was the only Catholic president in the United States. So he takes the construct of Mass and all of the different sections, and he builds a theater piece. It's not a musical exactly, but it's a piece about tolerance, about war, about peace, about protest, about inclusion, about acceptance, about assimilation. And this is all in this one piece. You have rock, you have jazz, you have 12-tone music, you have classical music, you have folk music. It's all in this piece. And to me, this is the whole package. Will there ever be another Leonard Bernstein? I'm asked that question often. I mean, from my perspective, there never will be. But there will be others who have the gift to transform the world through their art. This is what he did. He changed the world, and he used it to try to make it a better place. It's really hard to know, if Bernstein were born today, what he would have done and how he would have developed. My feeling is that even if he were born today, he would have broken all of the barriers. He would have been the first truly great American musical superstar in terms of the classical music. No matter when he lived, he would have taken the material of the moment in history, and he would have been able to use it in a novel way to create a new vocabulary, a new language. And in some ways, I think we need him now even more than we needed him then. I think this evening of programming will change you in a way, because Bernstein was someone who really wanted to change the world. He was complicated, of course, and scary sometimes too. But above all, he was a person who loved people. And he was a person who was filled with affection and love for everything living.